Welcome, fans of Star Trek, to the Captain's Yacht, a production of the newly minted Teachers Talkin' Trek. Join us today as we tour Star Trek's The Next Generation episode by episode. And we're at the very end of our first season, my friends. And we need all hands on deck today as we debate what works about these final episodes from 30 years ago. And we talk about what hasn't aged as well, awarding and revoking pips as befits each episode. We'll be asking our audience and listeners to rework, rethink, and reimagine various aspects of these episodes. This TrekWork can be submitted to the comments below, special accommodations for those who participate. And we definitely have one today, which I'm excited to go over. Oh, yeah. So we are glad to have you here, my friends, for our 12th and final episode of this portion of our podcast where we tour season 1 of TNG. Today we're going to be talking about conspiracy, the neutral zone, and then we're going to finish with a special retrospective on the legacy of season 1. So I am your host, Scholar Beta, at Scholar Beta on all things social media. And I'm joined here for our very last look at season 1 with my friend and co-host, Captain Kanaka. Welcome, my friend. How you doing?
Greetings, Ekomomai and Nukhne, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is safe, especially given current events. And I'm looking forward to wrapping up this experience, this odyssey that we've had together, Scholar Beta. Really looking forward to that.
Oh yeah, my friend. Oh yeah. Why don't you recap? What's anything special happening in podcast land news right now?
Well, we're wrapping up our season 1 review of Star Trek: The Next Generation. We're going to take a brief pause while we reset for season 2, our study of season 2. We have a commendation for original thinking that I think you're going to get a kick out of, Scholar Beta, because it's in reference to your TrekWork from last episode.
Oh, yeah, let's go.
So, special commendation for original thinking to Twitter user KenMC0219, who articulated that the best way to phase Yar out of Star Trek: The Next Generation was not to kill her as what happened on the show, but to, in his words, create, quote, a multi-story arc in which she investigates the depth of the parasite conspiracy. Which kind of makes sense, given the fact that she deals with security. She would have to go through and figure out the compromised security of Starfleet Command, and given the fact that conspiracy was only a couple episodes after Skin of Evil anyhow, you could have done that fairly well. So that I thought that was very well done and excellent work.
I like that.
Very well deserved. Twitter user at KenMC0219. Excellent work there.
Yeah, I like that. So it would be something like where we drop her off and keep her on Earth as she becomes head of Starfleet investigation into this conspiracy. Maybe she's going to get her own ship and she's going to have to go track down that homing beacon noise, and we can have a reunion with her at some point. Yeah, I love that. That's great.
I like it. I figured you would.
Nice job. Nice job. Definitely feel like that commendation has been earned there. So with that, my friend, is it time to get into episode 25, Conspiracy?
Definitely. Make it so, Scholar Beta. What's the story and what's the tropes?
Here we go, my friends. Episode 25, our penultimate episode of season 1, Conspiracy, stardate 41775.5. Captain Picard is called to a secret meeting of fellow Starfleet captains on an abandoned mining planet, where he learns of a very vague plot about some type of conspiracy. It's worse than you can imagine. Small bugs, kind of scorpion beetle hybrids that slither very slowly, are taking over the brains of Starfleet's top brass. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on in this piece. It's set up as a invasion, a silent invasion. And so some of our, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. The genre, I'm going to call this roughly thriller, because usually call it a science thriller or adventure thriller, but there really isn't any science involved in this episode at all. So it can't really be, classified as a science mystery, science thriller. It's just straight up thriller, I think. So tropes, what's going on in here? We have so many cool things happening. We've got interrupted shore leave. We've got bugs, parasites in the brain. We've got a fake out in reverse with Riker. We've got a they're coming for us, dun 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 moment, We've got a gross alien lunch/dinner. We've got head explosions. We've got Worf is beat up easily to show how strong someone is. That's going to be the beginning of that trope too. You remember that?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's only one person on board who could break my wrist, and that's Commander Data. Yeah, it's just that's how we from here on out. Worf is just going to be beat up to show how much stronger other people are. Anyways, so it's kind of a negative trope, but it's still established here. So that's what we're working with in Conspiracy. We have this kind of slow, silent alien invasion going on of the Federation, and I know some of the lore behind this episode. It was a part of the Borg, all that kind of stuff. I think people roughly understand that. But Captain, why don't you kind of flesh out the history of this for us? Give us a little more than just this was going to be the Borg. What do you think, my friend?
So there's a long backstory to this episode. It was intended to be a button for the coming of age subplot, but the writers dramatically clashed over what the story should be or could be. For example, if thinking back to coming of age, Admiral Quinn talks about there's something going on at Starfleet Academy or Starfleet Command, but they don't go into much detail, partially because the writers themselves didn't know how to pay off that setup. The original story was supposed to be Iran-Contra in the 24th century. They went out of their way to try to make the circumstances of the conspiracy basically be Iran-Contra, in which hardliners in the military try to take over the civilian Federation government for reasons.
Yeah.
So Paramount nixed this idea for being overly political. In this version of the script that Paramount nixed, it didn't involve parasites at all, what it referred to as the bluegills, amongst other names, the scorpion creatures that you mentioned. Yeah. They weren't in the script at all. As I said before, it was done by military hardliners, kind of perhaps as a bridge to what we saw in Heart of Glory, where you had the hardline Klingons trying to take over and quote unquote make the Empire glorious again or whatever. That's what they're trying to get at here. Some sort of connection to the military industrial complex. I also wrote Soviet Politburo in my notes because a couple years later you have hardliners in the Soviet Union take over and arrest Premier Gorbachev, which, okay, maybe that's some sort of influence there, some sort of hardliner mentality. Difficult to tell. Roddenberry vetoed this hardliner plot because there's no military in the 24th century for starters. And secondly, Starfleet would not stoop to such a low level. So that's where the parasites come in. Yes, sir.
Okay, can I ask you just, I know this is, we don't usually spend this much time in introduction, but could you just kind of quickly outline the Iran-Contra? Do you have like a 1-minute version of that? Because my history is a little, I know it's like Reagan selling guns to somewhere else, but that was the Contras, but they're in South America, not Iran. Could you help me with that?
So there's a group in Latin America called the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And they are overtly Marxist. They're overtly communist.
Got it.
And they take over Nicaragua in a democratic election. You have the Contras, who are guerrilla fighters, who are contra in Spanish means against. So they are in contra. They are against the Sandinistas.
I see.
And Reagan wants to fund them. He wants to fund them using money that was made off of a sale to Iran. But something called the Boland Amendment to that deal says you can't. They tried to do it anyway. And this is an event that could have been Reagan's Watergate. And a lot of the same verbiage that was used around Watergate with Nixon, what did the president know and when did he know it, was used during Iran-Contra. They kind of played up the fact that Reagan had Alzheimer's, so it was what did the president know and when did he forget? That was
goodness.
Ouch. That was the discourse there, and this actually comes up in my notes in terms of what's good. That's the deal there. And what happens is nothing comes of it. Reagan is not impeached. It's all mulled over. And how they decide to get the Contras funded is the CIA decides to look the other way and let drug cartels move drugs through Nicaragua and let the funds from the drug deals go and fund the Contras. Even with this financial backing, the Contras don't beat the Sandinistas. The Sandinistas lose in an election in the 1990s. And that causes what the CIA refers to as blowback, resulting in the drug cartel problems that we see today. So
wow,
that's the deal there. And they wanted to tackle that in Star Trek The Next Generation.
Well, this is one of those where if I can just say that the history is a little more interesting than the episode. Yeah, if I can just say. So I appreciate that primer because I was kind of curious. I saw a brief note online about the connection with Iran-Contra, but I didn't understand enough of that to kind of make the connection. So we're thinking maybe at some point some military hardliners are going to sell some weapons or try to create some type of coup or civil war inside of Starfleet. That was kind of the original aims.
Yeah.
Okay, I see, I see. Now that's going to come up in Deep Space Nine, kind of, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit here too. So, shall we get into what works, what doesn't, my friend, or is there anything else about the history we need to get into?
The script's author, Tracy Torme, who also wrote Big Goodbye, added the parasite aliens to appease Roddenberry. That's what sold Roddenberry on the story, is that it's not the admirals. It's an alien intelligence taking them over. Everybody liked it except Maurice Hurley. Maurice Hurley tried to nix the story, but then Berman, Bob Justman, and Roddenberry overrode Hurley, which set up this trilogy. That the first two episodes we're reviewing today and Q Who were supposed to be this all-encompassing trilogy, and I'll explain this later on. I think it's kind of interesting as to what season 2 is going to look like. And you already kind of mentioned this, Conspiracy Neutral Zone and Q Who were supposed to be a trilogy. Q Who was supposed to be the season 2 pilot or premiere. Didn't happen that way. And the Borg were supposed to be insects. So with that in mind, that's all I got in terms of backstory. Are we ready for what works and what doesn't?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's do it.
All righto. So I think you're running point on this one.
I am, my friend. So when I'm thinking about what's good about this, my list is unfortunately kind of short. I used to really like this episode as a kid. I remember it as the head blowing up episode. But when I rewatch it as an adult, Okay, so what do I like? Because that's the segment right now. Okay, so I'm enjoying seeing a major conflict that Starfleet has weathered at home or has to weather at home. It's always great to see Earth, I feel like, right? Going back there, seeing what's happening at Starfleet Command. That's always kind of cool. It reminds me of the Paradise Lost Deep Space Nine episode where Sisko has to go back to Earth, temporarily become part of Starfleet security, and then is watching Starfleet become more and more militarized and kind of freaking out about it and has to act. So great episode. The stakes, though. The stakes in that episode, I'm just going to say, are so much higher. The changeling infiltration of the Federation just feels so much more intense than the little bug infiltration. So I don't know. I'll talk around that. I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't seen that, but to me, the stakes don't feel very high in this. We'll get into that later. I appreciate also seeing the Great Hall of Starfleet, though it is hella empty. And we know that it's because they've spent all their money at this point. And we also know that the writer's strike is causing these drafts to basically be first drafts and then go right into filming. So I can forgive a lot of that, but it's pretty empty. Okay, so I'll say the thing that I actually like about this episode. Earth is kind of cool. Seeing the story seed set up for other Star Trek is cool. But the coolest part is the confrontation between Remick, Picard, and Riker, obviously, in my opinion. That's really the only part of the episode that stands out. Evidently, the Canadian Broadcast Association had to put out a warning in front of this episode, and it's the only episode of TNG with a warning in front of it. So that's kind of cool. I learned that. But nonetheless, even though there is that trigger warning, it's a great scene. Picard discovers Remick is kind of the mother creature. The screen behind Remick shows invasion plans of the Alpha Quadrant, I believe. And it's beautiful. It's a great set to look at. It's much better in the Blu-ray. I did kind of cheat and take a look at what it looks like in the Blu-ray. It's considerably better. And that eerie zoom out as we hear the homing beacon noise is really awesome. So I would say this episode is 45 minutes long, and about 2.5 minutes of it are great. And that's kind of where I see conspiracy. What about you, my friend? Thoughts about that? Pushback? What are you thinking?
So I haven't gotten into Paradise Lost yet. My study of Star Trek Deep Space Nine is stalling halfway through season 4. What I end up doing is I watch episodes while I run, and that's pretty much the only incentive I have to running. I'm much more of a heavy lifting kind of guy. So I know the episode you're talking about. I don't know the particulars, and I appreciate your discretion and being vague with the details on that. I know this is one of those things where it's been done and done better elsewhere, and I definitely agree with you on that. I think I have a few more good things to say about it than you do, but I definitely agree with you that this has been done better. That episode of Deep Space Nine, its reputation precedes itself, and it is built off of the back of this episode.
Yeah, let me hit a couple points of criticism, and then let's see what you're feeling as far as what's working. I guess my biggest first question is, so this is Starfleet? You know, not only are we reusing the map painting from Star Trek 4 to show Starfleet, so we don't even get an original look at it, but we get a very empty banquet hall too. And so, again, I'm going to give it a pass because there's no money, but it's just like, man, throwing a couple extra actors in there, you know, or taking some extras, dressing them up and having them bustle through the hallways or something, you know, come on. Picard's captain, friend Walker, can't remember his last name. Honestly, he was such a non-character, don't even remember him. His warning is so vague and rambling that I'm not even sure I would buy it. You know what I'm saying? If I put myself in Picard's shoes, I'm thinking, what? I got to be looking for something. Some weird things are going on. Okay, this is space. Some weird things are always going on. Anyways, and the final thing, the biggest piece for me, right, is I never really feel how this threat is much greater than the other issues we faced in season 1. I don't really see why this is any more important or why I should feel any more sense of dread or urgency or anything like that. They ultimately defeat their enemy by shooting it, which is about the simplest, dumbest way to, in the least Star Trek way to overcome an enemy. You know what I'm saying? It is one way, but it's just one way. I feel like greater threats have come from the Arsenal of Freedom, have come from lore, have come from Q, have come from the Binars, have come from, I even put Armus. I even feel like Armus is more of a threat to the Federation than this conspiracy. I just kind of, you know, I don't see any, like, I'm not afraid of it. I'm like, whoa, I don't see anything there. I was a huge fan of Animorphs as a kid, and I always thought that was so much more dreadful. The Yeerks were so much more dreadful, even though they're a total ripoff of the Wrath of Khan thing, which is kind of ripped off here, you know, like they just kind of reuse the design for Wrath of Khan a little bit and shove it in this, in my opinion. Okay, so I've got one question for you before I end my segment. If you want to use this to transition into yours, I kind of wish that this was the Romulans instead of the Borg. Okay, and I guess my question to you is, what do you think these creatures could have brought that the Romulans couldn't? You know what I'm saying? Like, the Romulans are the secret, shadowy, infiltrate, replace, do all sorts of stuff in the shadows. And I'm kind of thinking, like, that's what these people are trying to be, these little creatures. So what do you think? Could this have been better as the Romulans and just go straight into the neutral zone and then try to play up the Romulans more there? Or do you think there's something unique about the bugs and the brains that actually could have worked and not just kind of come off as silly? What do you think, my friend?
Thinking of this as the progenitors of the Borg, I think there's a lot of good stuff here that sets up the Borg. The idea that somebody you know has been compromised and their individuality is gone and they're under control of some other malevolent force. I think these insects being the progenitors of the Borg serve that purpose really well, because that's the thing that scared me the most about the Borg. They take away your individuality and everything you know about that person is gone.
I was just going to say, I do like that point that you make. Yeah, it's stripping someone of their individuality where, like, you see them, they look like themselves, but they aren't. Like, that is kind of terrifying. But another thing I think about the Borg that's really terrifying is they, like, you know, metal you up. They put you in kind of a crazy suit. They take out your eyes and replace them with... I always think that part, too, is really about stripping your humanity away. It just seems like, just take the bug out and you're back to normal. Though they kind of did that with Picard after he got assimilated. Yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of ask you that. I see them kind of borrowing from the Romulan shady plot. The Borg aren't really hiding the shadows. What we got in the end, that's not their style at all. No. So anyways, just wanted to bring that up. Hey, last thing I'm going to say, Pips, I'm going to go with Lieutenant for this episode. I'm going to say there's risk-taking on a budget, taking us back to Earth, and the death of Remick is pretty metal. So I'm going to give it 2 pips for that.
I'm going to give it 2 pips too. That's my deal. What I have written down here for my pips is good potential, bad execution, bad tone. That's what we have to work with here. So this is what works for this episode as far as I'm concerned. There's some pretty good characterization in the teaser. Some of the characters, rather, don't get served very well. LaForge has a moment in which he tells a joke. Data has out of all these characters I'm going to mention, Data has the biggest impact after this scene. But you got Troy talking about wanting relaxation. LaForge tells a joke. Data tries to explain the joke and tries to laugh. Worf doesn't swim because it's too much like bathing. Good character moment. Okay. The general story still has some connections to Iran-Contra, kind of, and that's something that I want to bring up because it's the writer's favorite contemporary topic to tackle during season 1. Too short a season. That's the first time in which I mentioned Iran-Contra, and that's very blatantly, they say in that episode, weapons for hostages, which is what precipitated Iran-Contra. Arsenal of Freedom has some Iran-Contra vibes in terms of you're giving advanced weaponry to people that aren't beholden to anybody, and then Conspiracy. So 3 episodes tackling the same topic, kind of interesting there. The notion that the military might be involved in dealings that are contrary to our values is a good approach. As I mentioned, Iran-Contra could have been another Watergate because it completely breaks all sorts of laws and the military's involved. It's good that Trek is introspective with this topic. It's about, can we trust our leaders? Which ties into this invasion of the body snatchers vibes. Can you really trust your friends? The double cross with Admiral Quinn works pretty well. It's kind of interesting to see them dabble in horror because this, I would argue, is the closest thing to actual horror, as evidenced by the fact that you have a trigger warning or viewer discretion advised disclaimer.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a nice touch giving Lieutenant Commander Remick the Queen as opposed to somebody else because it's the person you'd least expect. Also, props to all the actors for eating the grubs and spidery aliens. There's no way in heck I would ever do that, like ever. So lots of props to them on that. No way, no how. So that's not a lot, but those are the props that I have to say for Conspiracy on what's good. What's your perspective on that, Scholar Beta?
First, I want to give you some special commendation for pointing out this is horror. I have no idea how I missed that in my genre review. I was so focused on the fact that there's no science at all in this episode that I missed the fact that there is that body horror for sure. Do you remember that? Did you ever see that movie from the 80s, Scanners? About the telepaths? Oh, yeah. Head explosions. That's the only thing I could think about with this. I was like, oh, man. That was a good head explosion, too. I know that's not what we usually talk about on this podcast, but Scanners is an old school sci-fi film with Michael Ironside. Go check it out if you're over 18. Anyways, so props to you for remembering the horror part. Absolutely, you're right about that. Can you trust the leader's friends? I'm all about that. I like that, too. I appreciate you pointing that out. I can trust Picard. I feel like that as I've gone along through season 1. I definitely trust Picard, and I'm glad they put this stuff about bad admirals more towards the end, or the conspiracy towards the end, to contrast out the fact that I utterly trust Picard versus, okay, there might be something higher up that's messed up. And the only other thing I want to say about, when you were talking about horror, reminded me, I'm rewatching all of TOS season 1 right now, and I'm definitely not running while doing it. I'm definitely sitting on my butt. But anyways, I was thinking like that series actually has a ton of horror in it. Yes. Like even episode 1, the man trap is basically a alien who is sucking the salt out of humans, kind of a salt vampire, so to speak, masquerading as a pretty woman, or just masquerading as whoever you think is beautiful. I guess it gets a horror too, and it's a man in that scene. But my point is, there's a lot of horror going on in TOS that you don't get in TNG. That's true. This is a cool, interesting link. So, hey, appreciate you bringing those ideas up for sure. Now let's get into it. What doesn't work for you, my friend? What do you not like?
So I kind of agree with Maurice Hurley on this. His biggest complaint about this episode is that it's too dark for Star Trek. Considering that Star Trek generally is something that is for the whole family to enjoy. Classic Trek, as in TOS to a certain extent. Next Generation, definitely. It's all general audience oriented, which is one of my criticisms of Kurtzman Trek, is that is most decidedly not. There's Star Trek's answer to the chestburster scene. You mentioned Scanners. I mentioned Aliens because in its own way, it's even more gruesome and violent than Alien, because not only do you have somebody's chest exploding, you have their head exploding, and you have the entire chest cavity erupt. And you don't see anything like that in the first 2 Alien movies. Not really.
I was just going to say, I don't remember how old I was when I saw Alien, but I was way more freaked out about that chest burster than I was about this guy's head exploding. That's all I've got to say. Sorry to interrupt on that.
Fair point. Tries to another criticism that I have is it tries to be a bigger payoff than it is, in the context of the fact that this episode is the penultimate episode of season 1. This big payoff to the whole season, which it most decidedly can't be, because the first big threat was the Ferengi. Now it's the conspiracy. No big payoff there. It's front loaded with backstory. There's no big evidence of a slow moving coup. Nothing is dropped earlier, so you have to dump all this stuff. It gives Data a great scene, but it's still a blemish where Data has to go through and Data has to analyze, and he makes some observations. Another thing that talks about it being a tad too dark: needlessly violent. Quinn fights Riker, LaForge, and Worf for no reason other than bad guy bad.
Yeah.
And that dovetails directly into my study of Admiral Quinn. They did Admiral Quinn backwards. This is what I mean by that, because he was featured in Coming of Age. And in that, he's kind of grumpy and stoic. And in this one, he's friendly. It would have been a lot more effective in 30-year retrospect, hindsight, that if you made him friendly in Coming of Age and then have him be kind of wary and feed into Picard's suspicions and then have that be the double cross, I think that would have worked a lot better. Also, Picard knows...
Yeah.
That's my perspective on that. Picard knows Quinn isn't really Quinn. The way he finds out Quinn is compromised is way too easy. Maybe he read the script I put in my notes.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing is the story had such a great tell in terms of struggling with memory, but they didn't do that. He could have talked about, remember that time at the academy when we did this, and he completely blows it off. Or if you had a tighter writing perspective, mentioning something in Coming of Age and having him completely miss it, that would have been the tell too. But yeah, there's no payoff to there. And my biggest complaint out of all of this, and you kind of touched on this, is what's the aliens' goal? Invasion of the Body Snatchers worked in the 1950s because communism was a threat. And not saying that it wasn't a threat in the 1980s, but it's a different kind of threat in 1980s America versus 1950s. And this ties into the TrekWork here, because you compromise all of the officers in Starfleet, then what? Do you subjugate the citizens? I don't know. I've hurt my brain on this. This is why I'm kind of interested to see how they do this in Paradise Lost in DS9, because I got nothing. I really got nothing. So
yeah,
those are my critiques there.
And that's why I feel like this kind of a Romulan plot. You know, we know what the Romulans do. They get in there, they destabilize, they cause paranoia, they create paranoia, they create division, right? Ultimately, and we know why, is because they don't want the Klingons of the Federation to fulfill their ability to work together and maybe drive the Romulans out of the quadrant or have the ultimate power in the quadrant, even though they kind of already do. Anyways, yeah, you're right. I don't really understand their goal or the motivation at all. Maybe we would if they, continued with this insect plot. Anyways, let's quickly do a salute to a reused matte painting. And that would be Starfleet headquarters, reused from Star Trek 4. It's not widescreen. Go check out the widescreen version. It includes more detail and is definitely better. And it just chopped off here for letterbox. Definitely. And our Enterprise interior, also going to keep it super brief. Searched around screen caps and in the script for a unique room, but there really wasn't one. So we're going to do the transporter room where Admiral Quinn beams on board. And sadly, it's without Chief O'Brien, but honestly, that's a good thing. You don't want Chief O'Brien in that transporter room. He's way more useful elsewhere. So yeah, that's what I got for you for Enterprise interiors and our matte paintings, my friends. That's our last one for the season 1, and it's a reuse.
There you go.
Here we go. Episode 26, right? The neutral zone.
There we go.
Stardate 41986.0. After 53 years, the Enterprise makes contact with the Romulans. Also, Data unfreezes 3 humans from cryogenic sleep drifting in space on a forgotten satellite. They turn out to be quite a distraction and pretty annoying. Sorry, I just had to put that into the premise. You're going to find out I don't have a lot of kind things to say about this episode. So let's quickly talk again for the genre. Gosh, I hope I don't miss one like I did last time. I guess I'm saying again, this is kind of thriller, spy thriller kind of stuff. And then comedy,
Yeah.
basically. The thriller is the countdown to meeting the Romulans. The comedy is all the fish out of water. What year is it for the three humans woken up? Yeah, I don't have too much. And then my trope list is pretty brief too. Kind of sci-fi staples that come up in here is the big enemy reveal, the literal decloak of the Romulan vessel, cryo sleep, and then cryo sleep gone wrong too. Definitely major sci-fi tropes. And then the last one, I don't really know what to call this, but it's, kind of a what year is it? Fish out of water trope. So those are kind of the three big ones that I saw. And this episode really feels disjointed. Like there's two totally different plots going on. I think I have a connection between them, but it's pretty flimsy. So anyways, what's going on behind the scenes with this very last episode of TNG season 1?
So this is the second part of Maurice Hurley's Borg trilogy. The Bluegill parasites from Conspiracy were part 1. The original purpose of this episode was to start an alliance between the Federation and the Romulans to defeat the Borg. Q-Who, which I mentioned earlier, was supposed to be the premiere of season 2 to introduce the insectoid Borg. It became more cost-effective to turn them into cyborgs. A lot better, in my opinion, for the arc for season 2. Also, it's really curious to interpret Maurice Hurley's ideas for season 2 because they sound ahead of their time. The presented evidence sounds like season 2 was supposed to be more long-form storytelling, like Game of Thrones or Westworld or something like that, or Lost, where every episode builds off of each other, which was very much not the norm in late 1980s America as it is now. All of Hurley's plans were dashed due to the 1988 Writers Guild of America strike, which delayed production of season 2 immensely, which is why season 2 only has 22 episodes instead of the customary 24 to 27. And the strike almost canceled The Next Generation outright. Then creative differences between Hurley and everybody else almost caused even more dramatic revisions. More on that when we get into our season 2 study. So I think I'm running point on this one. And it's kind of funny that you don't like the cryo passengers, because to me, they're probably one of the best parts of the episode. They're fun. The main thesis of this episode is that the 24th century, the world of Star Trek, is a world in which you want to live. There are very few ways in which you can properly sell that than to take somebody from our era and have them adjust to the plenitudes and the want for nothing and the utopian aspects of the 24th century. Each of these characters has their own unique reaction to this fish out of water scenario. Claire Raymond tackles the human consequences of cryosleep. Everyone she knows is dead. Ralph Offenhouse, hardball businessman, is taken aback by the human condition in the 24th century, but parlays his cunning negotiating skills in the climax. He talks about examining the Romulan, and even though this is an alien he's never met, he instinctually knows that the Romulan is bluffing and lets Picard know that. Pretty nice little payoff there. And Sonny Clemens, comic relief, fun-loving, Crusher, and Picard got him so wrong he doesn't hate life. Kind of reminds me of my father-in-law from rural Oklahoma. I like these characters. The cryo passenger plot balances fish out of water humor with legitimate world building, in which it further explains money doesn't exist in the 24th century. All medical problems that we have now don't exist. They're as treatable as the common cold in the 24th century, and even the common cold is extinct. I think that's hilarious. No TV, no baseball, but there's free martinis, so I guess there's the trade-off there. It all comes to a head when Picard confronts Offenhouse after Offenhouse abuses the ship's comm panel. We've grown out of our infancy, and that sets up almost as well as Hiding Q does, but it sets up Roddenberry's thesis about the 24th century in that all the stuff that's getting us down now is old hat, resolved and finished by the 24th century. The plots get crossed to me. I guess you could call this a B plot with the Romulans. Is a serviceable refashioning of a classic Trek plot. Although it's a little anticlimactic, it does its job of establishing the bigger threat that neither the Federation nor the Romulans have ever encountered. That's the deal there. Also, Troy gives a good psychological profile on the Romulans. talks about the Romulans won't make the first move. They're going to react to you. You kind of see that in future episodes with the Romulans. The one with Galand and Kor, it's not Face of the Enemy, but it's the one where Geordi and the Romulan pilot are stranded on the planet.
The Enemy, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. It's not
Or
Face
The
of the Enemy.
Wounded.
That's the one. The Wounded. That's the one. The Wounded. They write the Romulans based off of what Troy's psychological profile is there, because they're trying to goad Picard into violating orders and crossing the neutral zone to start a war. So good touch there. And as I said before, the main thesis of this episode is the general thesis of season 1 of the show and all 7 seasons of Next Generation. The 24th century is a paradise for humanity. Medical miracles are everywhere, and there's no money.
My only response to that really is, and I get you, you know, I kind of feel like we're assuming to some degree that this Roddenberry thesis is a good idea and should be executed in a TV show, and parts of it should be, but not all of it, you know, and I think getting away from it actually does the show some good. Maybe we can talk about that in our retrospective a little bit, but some of the best episodes actually get away from that, in my opinion. And then the second thing, I feel like, yes, I get it, the world building part. However, these B-plot characters, I feel like I'm stuck with for so long, and I get so tired of spending the episode with them. It's like, I know who they are. I live and work with them. I live and work among them. You know what I say? So now back to Worf and Data, the best part of the show, the reason I tune in. You know what I'm saying? I get what you're saying. I totally get what they're going for there, and how different characters are having different problems adapting. The kind of hillbilly southerner guy, he's having an easier time going about it because he kind of has a, you know, Hakuna Matata philosophy in life. Never thought I'd quote The Lion King on Star Trek, but here it is. I get it. It just, to me, it seems like the most superficial way to show a difference between these people. My last thing I'll say is that they kind of wake up and they just get expository bombed. This is the whole show don't tell. I wish the entire episode could have been about this instead of telling me the episode is about Romulans, putting them in there for 3 minutes, and then putting these guys in there for 40 minutes. You know what I'm saying? I just feel like I am tricked and fooled and kind of a bait and switch, you know, and that's the part I don't care for. What doesn't work for you, my friend?
I definitely hear you on that, and that's what I'm talking about, what's bad about the neutral zone. I know, given your background as an English teacher, your common pet peeve is whether plots connect or not.
Yeah, to some degree, yeah, for sure. Like, if there is a larger connection, yeah.
My big thing here, and I've underlined it with 3 lines, is do these plots connect? And I can't even tell the A plot or the B plot here, because one plot is discovering a floating derelict with passengers in cryo-freeze. Botany Bay much is what I put in parentheses.
Exactly. Thank God no Khan on board. Yeah.
Well, and that comes up later in my criticism too. And then revived people from our time adjust to 24th century sensibilities, and then the B plot, question mark, is the destruction of outposts on the Romulan border. Call back to Balance of Terror in the original series. Yeah, they don't really connect. The only payoff I can think of is Ralph Offenhouse, the hardball businessman, calling the Romulans bluff in a somewhat contrived scene in the climax. But hey, it works. I guess it works reasonably well. And then other criticisms I have here is, seriously, did nobody learn from Space Seed?
Yeah.
Picard
don't just wake up random people.
Picard is weirded out by the fact that the passengers were already dead when it could have been more appropriate for him to cite. The last time an Enterprise crew did something like this, it was Khan. And this could have been an interesting bait and switch where you don't know any of these people and you don't know their backstory. You build it up to be a Botany Bay scenario. And you think they're conquistadors, but they happen to be average people. Also, this is my last reference to Space Seed. The cryoship plot device made sense in Khan's episode Space Seed because Khan was a recently deposed ruler of more than a quarter of the Earth, using humanity's best resources to escape the consequences of his defeat. The same kind of logistics would not, in caps and underlined 3 times, be used for a 1980s housewife. The executive and the musician, maybe, but not the housewife. As Spock would say, it's a totally illogical conclusion. Put them in a vault somewhere. I know they make some sort of BS line about, oh, we put them in orbit so they could avoid brownouts and whatever. Okay, fine. But then how do you end up from Earth orbit to near Romulan space?
The neutral zone?
Exactly. Those are my criticisms there. With that said, I'm giving this 1.5 pips. I'm giving it a lieutenant junior grade. Solid wrap up to season 1, nothing more. It reinforces Roddenberry's utopian thesis of humanity. As I said, it's not best of both worlds, but it's not Shades of Grey. Decent is my perspective there.
Yeah, not Shades of Grey. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's something you can say about it. That is something you can say. Okay, pips for me. I'm going to say the B plot is insufferable, and I'm thinking that the people are the B plot. I'll talk a little bit about why. I mean, mostly the title. Why would you title this The Neutral Zone and then make it about whatever? Anyways, here's what my notes say for my pips. I say B plot is insufferable. Interesting music and great Romulan starship design saves this episode from being court-martialed. I'm gonna go 1 pip ensign. You know, that's
okay.
That's the best I can. That's the best I can do right now. So let's kind of get into it. Okay, so you said you couldn't think of a connection. I came up with one, but it is far-fetched. That's why I say this is like on the most superficial level. There's something going on here about a reflection of humanity. So here's what I'm thinking. We haven't seen Romulans in a long time. 53 years. I want to say Data says 18 months, but why would he say that? Why wouldn't he say 54 years, 4 months? You know, I'm not really sure. Anyways, I can't remember exactly how long it's been. 53, 54 years. Yet we are judging them by outdated information. That's what Data says when they're going to go confront them. So now look at these humans from the past. This capitalist, this, for lack of a better word, hick, this very sad woman, and ask, do we want to be judged by our past?
Okay.
I don't think that's actually what's going on, but that's kind of what I was thinking. You know, humans were kind of crappy back in the day. Do we really want to be judged by a capitalist, a really fraught? Is she sad? Is she upset? Is she depressed? I don't really know. I guess I would be too. You know, if everyone I knew was dead. I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to belittle her situation. Is my point. But I guess we're trying to look at these folks and be like, yeah, this is who we used to be. Depressed, money hungry, or just throw it all to the wind and drink ourselves and smoke ourselves to death or something like that. And no, we don't want to be judged by that. Therefore, why are we judging the Romulans by their 53 year ago past? That's the only possible thing I can see. Yet you can't even really say that because the Romulan stuff is so underdeveloped. I actually went back with a stopwatch and tried to time how long they're on screen. It was about 3 minutes. You know, a little bit more than that. It depended on where you consider the Romulans being on screen. But my point is, like, they are there for so little. It's really tough to get really to understand who they are, or if we should trust them, or if this alliance makes any sort of sense, or if we've overcome prejudice or whatever. You know, so that's the only thing I can say about that. Is that could be maybe some type of connection. I got 2 more things. And I want to see what you think about that overreading.
Okay.
Okay, so these people died. They were frozen in hopes of getting a cure to their death. And then they got what they wanted, and 2/3 of them are pretty upset about it, which is kind of amazing. I sort of love that. I think that's like one of the only cool commentaries on those folks, to be perfectly honest. Okay, and so here's what I really want to ask you about too. So these folks were going to drift into the sun, right? Is that before they were saved, I think? Or they were just they were on a path of destruction.
Yes.
And so Riker says, let nature take its course. So this is something he's going to express again in the episode Pen Pals. I guess I want to kind of ask you, does nature have a course? Is this kind of sophistry to, you know, be given some sort of conscious moral design to nature here? So Data doesn't waste time. Is Riker really thinking this through and saying what he wants to say? I don't know. I'm just kind of I'm curious what you think about that. And then what do you think about my super weak reading of the connection between the plots? What do you think about that?
I thought you were going to go in a completely different direction with the nature take its course thing. I thought you were going to invoke the prime directive. Natural course of events.
Exactly. What is the natural course of events?
I think that argument goes completely out the window. I really don't like they're already dead thing, that plot device. I think that's, if they were alive, that makes it a lot more interesting and opens up an ethical discussion.
Yeah.
And that would have made it interesting. I really don't I think it's terribly contrived that they went that way. Honestly, nature taking its course. If they're already dead, let them go. I guess that could have been an interesting debate, but they don't have it. They have Sonny Clemens talk about even in the 24th century, the Atlanta Braves are still bad. So comic relief. Okay, fine. So that's my deal there. Honestly, it's like there's not much I have to say about that because that concept in and of itself could have been its own episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Exactly.
But
you don't want to smash it in with a Romulan plot. That could be the main plot, might be the secondary plot. When you and I aren't even in agreement on that. It's obviously the secondary plot by runtime, screen time, but by title, by thematic idea, by setting, in the first act, it should be a Romulan episode. Anyways.
In terms of your connection to humanity, I do like that. That's very well done. I don't think that was intentional because if it were, there would have been a discussion at the end cap of the entire episode, where Riker would tell something to Picard. We judge them by 50-year-old information, and I do like that connection. That makes me enjoy this episode a little bit more. So those are my thoughts. What doesn't work for you,
I think we already kind of basically hit on this. What I'm calling the B plot characters, the woken up humans. I'm horribly bored by that. I think my thematic reading is just me trying to find a connection between the two. Like I said, you were saying earlier, rather, I am looking for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, from like a structuralist point of view, I think that's interesting. There are some episodes with a straightforward A plot. There is no B plot. That are amazing too, and I'm fine with those episodes as well. But I guess the only other thing I'll say about this, the last thing I'll say, and this is a discussion I was reading online earlier in preparation for this. But someone online was debating, what's the difference between Cardassians and Romulans? And I'm really on this kick. Of who are the Romulans. We talked about it with Picard. We get no satisfactory answer. After watching season 1 of Picard, we still don't know anything more about the Romulans except they're hyper paranoid and they have 2 secret police, not just the Tal Shiar, but the Yacht Vash. So they're really paranoid. They're really fascist. Anyways, I guess I'm just kind of wondering, from your point of view, what do you think? What is the Romulan? What defines them versus Klingons and Cardassians? What makes them unique? How could we lean in a little bit more to the Romulans, explore a little bit more? I know this isn't really a criticism, but it's just kind of something I want to know because we get so little of them in this episode. And I guess I'm curious, what do you think defines them? And what could we have seen in this episode to learn a little bit more about them? Have some real world building about the Romulans, not just the Federation.
The secrecy in regards to what makes the Romulans different from the Cardassians.
Yeah. I'll make a little less secrecy for sure.
That's the big one. Secrecy is all that they do. They have a secret police. They have technology that
cloaks them, literally. Yes.
Literally. So that plays up the secrecy. Nothing is ever as it seems. If you want to dig too deep into Star Trek Picard, even their names are lies.
Yep.
I'm not sure how I feel about that trope. With the Cardassians, you have the same kind of malevolence in terms of their inclinations for domination, but they're a lot more overt about it.
Yeah. Oh,
what
absolutely.
You see is pretty much what you get with the Cardassians to a certain point. Gul Dukat, and that's what makes him interesting, is secretive and plays both sides and stuff like that, from what I can see 4 seasons into Deep Space Nine. But that would be the defining characteristics. The single one between the Romulans and the Cardassians is the fact that they have secrecy. They still have the same goals, but they have different executions of those goals.
Yeah, okay. You summarized it perfectly. I read like 4 pages of this discussion. I mean, maybe probably more than that. And basically what it comes down to, or what these folks were thinking online, this is a Reddit post, Daystrom Institute. So I want to give some credit where I can. I wish I could link back to the original poster, but I don't have you. I'm sorry. This is about a week ago. I was looking at this, and yeah, that's what it came down to. Overt fascism versus like state secrets fascism. And have you ever seen the movie, sorry, last idea on this, Lives of Others, about the East German state and the Secret Service, secret police, the Stasi?
I'm familiar with the Stasi. I have not seen that movie, though.
Check it out. It is only if you're having a great day, though, because it is so depressing. Like seeing what a life under state surveillance, even with that type of technology, was, it's just incredible and just so sad. And just the paranoia and the control and dominance over the society and the disappearing of people is so upsetting and sad and frustrating. I think you could see that if we develop the Romulans more, having more of that should be really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you nailed the difference between them. I'd love to see more Romulans in this. I'd love to have that world building in the neutral zone instead of like what I already kind of know about humans from the 21st century. They're not great. I mean, some of them are.
Yeah.
Especially, two peeps, talking about Star Trek on a Sunday, posting on a Tuesday. Those peeps are cool, but everyone else, no, I'm just messing. So yeah, okay. Let's wrap up ideas on conspiracy. We've done pips. I think it's time. Let's get into some. I'm sorry, not conspiracy, neutral zone. Let's get into some Trek work. What do we want these fine listeners to do for this very last episode of season 1?
So real quick, create in the comments very brief epilogue describing what happened to these characters, the crowd passengers.
Yeah.
For example, Sonny Clemens talks about reigniting his career, restarting his career. Does that take off? Is he doing a tour in Ferengi casinos or whatever? That might be interesting. How does Offenhouse handle the fact that there is no money in the Federation and his entire life until this point has been about accumulating more wealth? What happens to him there? I have an idea. I don't want to spoil it. I'm curious to see what everybody else has. There's that. Also, Claire Raymond, what happens there? Does she basically live in-house with her distant descendant or whatever? Hers isn't as interesting as the other two from my perspective in terms of what these people can do in the proverbial sandbox of the 24th century. But who knows? Maybe somebody can make a really interesting and compelling epilogue to Claire Raymond. So that's my Trek work there.
Excellent. And I'll just quickly wrap up this episode by saying there are no matte paintings for the last one. Sad. But there is an Enterprise interior. We have a guest lounge. Again, remember, no 10 forward in this season. So we have to put these people somewhere. So I've got a couple shots of the interior of this guest lounge. I don't see any windows. So it's like, we're in space, but you don't get to observe it. Sorry. And here's some chests. Now stop being so annoying and leave us alone. Here's some 3-dimensional chests. Go knock yourself out, even though there's no rule book that I could see. But anyways, there it is, the guest lounge, our final Enterprise interior of the season.
There we go. So now that we're finished with seasons, let's get into a brief retrospective on all this. What are your thoughts of season 1 of Next Generation, Scholar Beta?
When all is said and done, I don't have that many problems with season 1. Yeah, there's some really terrible episodes, but I'm reminded that this is really a show about the characters on it. It's a format where we can get a large number of characters. Therefore, if you don't like one of them or one of them doesn't click with you, there's a pretty big pool of them, and there's plenty of episodes to tell stories about all these characters. So I'm just reminded of that and how much I appreciate that format and how the syndicated, that it doesn't have a lot of advantages in terms of long form storytelling. In fact, it almost has no advantages except subtlety, and forcing the audience to pay attention to see what the connections are between these. But I still appreciate the short story format that they can get away with, and that they can tell so many different stories in so many parts of this ship on so many different worlds. And that to me is really fascinating. And something that, is missing kind of in modern Trek, modern TV.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
Definitely.
Generally my feeling on season 1 is that I was entertained many, many, many times during this season. I know you want to talk about other first seasons of Trek, but what are you thinking overall, big picture?
So in terms of big picture, here are my thoughts. This was a show that only the executives at Paramount wanted to make. They literally had to bribe Gene Roddenberry, and the Star Trek faithful hated Next Generation until the end of season 3. Best of both worlds is what turned it around. Generally, you need 3 seasons of a Star Trek show for it to find its footing, find its stride, to get the verdict in on things. And this is solid. As you pointed out, characters are interesting. They are developed, which is something that Kurtzman Trek definitely needs to take notes on, because other than the main protagonist and maybe 2 or 3 others, there's nothing. And the fact that they devote so much time to developing these characters and their personalities in absolutely nothing scenes, like going back to Conspiracy, every actor has a time to shine in that teaser for Conspiracy, where LaForge tells a joke, Data tries to laugh, Troy talks about relaxation, asks Worf goes, no, Klingons don't swim. That's good. So my impression is it's rather solid, all things considered, especially taking into account that not even Roddenberry wanted to make this show. Paramount stepped forward, Roddenberry protested, and they threw a lot of money at him, and that convinced him. With that said, how would you, what would be your favorite first season out of all the Star Trek shows? Scholar Beta.
You know, that's a great question. I wish I had months to prepare and give you, like, you know, an evidence-based answer. But I kind of went back and I made some notes on the ones I know the best. I know the best: TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and the original series. And I'm actually kind of went back to watch some of my favorite original series to see, you know, what I like about these first seasons. And I think, again, what it comes down to is dropping interesting characters into a world and giving us plenty of opportunities to see them shine. And I think, to me, if I look at my favorite ones, I think TNG and Deep Space Nine do a great job of that. Okay. I think Voyager is really interesting, but I really do love the 7 of 9 character. And I think when she comes in, that show really takes off, but she doesn't get there for a couple seasons. Okay. And I also think Voyager struggles a little bit because its stories for season 1 were really contained, and really, I don't think they quite knew how to handle yet the 7-year voyage home, you know? So it's still awesome, though. And we talked about Caretaker being a great first episode. In TOS, you know, every time I see Spock on screen, you know, my heart flutters a little bit. Kirk, too, I think he does a great job. Every time Bones is sarcastic, you know, there's just, again, it's about the characterization. And when I look at these, there's enough interesting characters to just keep me there. So I'm going to say TNG, Deep Space Nine. I'm going to give a special shout out to Dax, Sisko, Odo, Kira, and Quark. I loved you immediately.
DS9 takes it for you.
Tied with TNG, I'm going to say it's an exact tie. Photo finish tie.
Even that episode where they do alien hopscotch.
From Deep Space Nine?
Yeah.
I think like it's the second episode where they meet the guy who's being hunted from the beta or the gamma quadrant coming through the wormhole. And I love that one, like, immediately. And then there's one where, like, Kira has to confront a Cardassian who's not whom he seems to be. That's a great one. Still, I think there's enough interesting things going on, and enough cool characters to make me pause and say, okay, I'm going to give this more time. And I've watched all of Deep Space Nine and TNG multiple times. This is not my, you know, so to me, that's the evidence right there.
Good deal. So my favorite first season, I would say the original series. There are so many classic episodes. Yeah. Arena, Space Seed, City on the Edge of Forever, Naked Time, all of which, especially Naked Time and City on the Edge of Forever, invest in the characters and how they operate, what they would do in a situation. Honorable mention, and I'm curious to see how our viewers are going to take this, but Discovery. I picked this one by default because compared to the painfully nonsensical writing of seasons 2 and 3, season 1 is good by default. It's also a masterpiece, mostly due to Brian Fuller's influence, and you can definitely tell when he left the show. I'm just going to say that. I was pulling for season 1. There's actually something in Discovery, a season 1 episode of Discovery, that tackles the same topic that Next Generation does, and does it better. I'm looking forward to talking about that with you all when we get to that episode. So, original series takes first, Discovery takes second. That's my take on that. With that in mind, what would you say, Scholar Beta, is the best Next Gen episode out of season 1?
All right, here we go. Here's my best. I think my favorite episode is We'll Always Have Paris. Time travel, Picard's past, Data seeing his future and past self, and preventing the galaxy universe from unraveling. I love that episode. And then number 2, I'm going to say is 11001001. I love the binars. I love the ship hijacking. I love that it's a benevolent hijacking. And who doesn't crush on Minuet? You know, she's great. She's awesome. And it has a great matte painting, too. And then number 3 for me for this season is Data lore. Brent Spiner is awesome. Data is one of the best parts of TNG. Lore is an intriguing character. It's kind of an interesting twist on the evil cousin, brother, whatever you want to call Lore, whatever relation he is. I guess brother, it makes sense. And then I'll give an honorable mention to Coming of Age. Those are my top 3 with an honorable mention.
Real quick, what, just on the spot, if you were to give pips to the Minuet episode and Data lore?
Yeah, I said those other 2 might be like lieutenant commanders. You know what I'm saying? I think I'm looking with things that are interesting about them is they're unique, at least to me. I see them as unique stories. I think the science fiction aspect of both is intriguing, or all 3 of them. So that I think that it's interesting on the surface. It's paced well. I'm not horribly bored, and it's a fascinating sci-fi. That bumps it to Lieutenant Commander automatically in my mind.
Gotcha. I was really curious about that. In terms of my top 3,
yeah, let's have them.
I judged this based off of what these episodes did for the show more than my personal preference. So what I have here is the big one is Hide and Q. I would give
nice.
I would give Hide and Q 3 pips. Great moments with Q, kind of sets up the arc for All Good Things. That concept there between that and Roddenberry's thesis being on full display are the 2 things that make it better, or rather the best episode out of season 1 in terms of what it does to the universe. Sets up Q, does so in a more efficient way than Farpoint. As I said, sets up the interplay between Picard and Q, sets up All Good Things, sets up Roddenberry's thesis that humanity will continue to improve itself. It improved itself from the 20th century to the 24th century, and give it 4 more centuries. If we're following Roddenberry's thesis and not other writers, it's going to get even better. And there's legitimate characterization. There's character drama for the first time in the show, in which they have clashes with each other. You also have character building in which Riker attempts to give his shipmates what they want, and that informs their character infinitely better than anything modern Trek happens to produce. And that's why, to me, that's the best one. Data lore is the second one, going into the broader scale of things. If I were to give Hide and Q pips, I'd give it 3. Data lore, I'd either give it 3 or 3.5. Commander, pending promotion. Strong examination of Data. I've already talked about how Data has empowered me on the autistic spectrum. That's one of the reasons why it's my favorite. But in terms of what it does for the show, strong setup for 2 memorable reoccurring villains. You got Lore, and you also got the crystalline entity, which sets up a really interesting story. Silicon Avatar, I think, is the episode in which a survivor of that colony comes to terms with all the nonsense there. And then the third episode, I would probably say, by default, I guess we'll always have Paris, because I gave that one 3 pips, because it is a good examination of Picard. Yep, that's what I'll do there. What are your thoughts on Hide and Q? My thesis that Hide and Q is the strongest one. Yeah, I had a feeling.
Yeah, I know you would. Dude, I hate that episode. But let's think about it. I do appreciate, why you're looking at it as one of the best of season 1. Yes, again, I think you're right that it models Roddenberry's thesis, but I'm going to say, is that thesis prima facie, is that a great, awesome thing to do for a TV show? And I slightly disagree. And that's kind of why, if I thought Roddenberry's thesis was the end-all be-all, yeah, I'd probably be a little bit more behind Hide and Q. My things I disagree with you, I don't necessarily think it sets up All Good Things. I definitely see that as set up from Encounter at Farpoint, maybe a tiny sliver of Deja Q, but I don't know. I'm not quite seeing your connection there to All Good Things. And then here's my only problem. My only last problem I have with Q Who is that it's just so ethnocentric. Humans are the end-all be-all. We're so good. We can get there on our own. Well, in Q Who, you're going to find out you can't get there on your own. You're gonna find up you're not as great as you think you are. All that smugness is clouding your view screen, and you can't see, the stars in front of you. So I kind of think that I'm just not into the whole humans are the end all be all the best thing. And that's my only critique about Data. We've argued about that too. Though I fully have come around to he was built by a human, kind of makes sense that he wants to become what his creator was. I can get behind that. I'm fine with that. But I'm not behind humans are the end all be all best part of the universe in the 24th century. That's all.
Definitely.
But I think your other picks are awesome. I love Data War and We'll Always Have Paris. I love those two episodes. That's why they're on my list too.
There you go. I approached this one in the sense that in terms of universe building and contributions to the story, some people really like the interpretation of the thesis that you point out. And I definitely see that thesis gets challenged a lot in Deep Space Nine. So I'm looking forward to that. With that in mind, what are the worst episodes, Scholar Beta?
Here we go. Here are my top 3 worst. Number 3, Angel 1. Fantasy of the Same. Horrible costumes. Homophobia, maybe. Maybe transphobia. I'm not really sure. And then it's a matriarchal society where the women just act like men, in my opinion. Number 2 for the worst episode, Justice. It's another fantasy of the same, horrible costuming, absurd premise about executing people who fall in punishment zones. How could you have a society that got to where it got by having punishment zones and randomly executing people who randomly were in a punishment zone, which is established randomly? To me, that is the dumbest thing ever. And finally, number 1, you know what it is. Say it with me. It's Code of Honor. Yep. It's offensive stereotypes, over-sexualizing black men's lust towards white women. Very offensive there, and contributing to a stereotype that is a major part of anti-blackness in the United States. It has an amazing matte painting that's ruined by a horrible episode. But to be honest, it has amazing ideas that are ruined by this horrible, offensive, stereotype. There's some great things in there. And like we said, it was like a Yar moment, one of the only Yar moments from season 1. Again, horribly mangled and messed up. So, the honorable mention, you're going to like this one. Honorable mention for the worst episode, The Neutral Zone. So there they are, my top 3 worst. How about you, my friend? What are you thinking?
Real quick, if you were to give pips to any of these, would any of your episodes get pips, or would they all be red shirt crewmen?
Code of Honor, definitely red shirt.
Okay.
Justice, definitely red shirt. Angel 1, definitely red shirt. Yeah, I would say there's nothing good in any of those episodes. Okay. Not that I can, not good as in, no, I'm just going to say no, not redeemable. Kind of like Armis.
Gotcha. Well, funny you mention Armis. So here are my words.
He didn't even make it on my top 3.
Oh, he didn't. Well, he did on mine. So Code of Honor, single worst, irresponsibly rendered, controversial at the time, even worse now, goes out of its way to be offensive for reasons that you pointed out. Only redeeming quality is Yar's characterization, and for that is the only reason why it only gets half a pip, in my opinion, because it is an attempt to develop Yar, albeit handled terribly. Justice is my second worst episode, also half a pip. Idiot plot, terribly contrived. Picard gives a good speech, and that's the only reason why that one gets saved. And so I wouldn't repeat my same criticisms. Angel 1 gets honorable mention, although I do maintain that there is a subtle progressive commentary there in which all the men are incapacitated on the Enterprise and the women take over. But Skin of Evil is the third worst, in my opinion. Everything about this episode is a cop-out. Handling Yar's departure, making a villain, all bad.
Yeah, my only reason Skin of Evil didn't get on there is it wasn't culturally offensive. I know I'm laughing, and it's not a funny topic, but the idea is that those 3 were really messed up. Like, there are some just huge red flags just about the premise of alien species. And so you're kind of wondering, from the perspective of the writers, like, what are you thinking? What's going on? Why would you build a society that they're going to go, participate in this episode that is like this? Whereas Skin of Evil, to be honest, I sort of understand the reason for that episode existing. Yar's wanting an exit, even though it's just disgusting to look at Armis and ask, what is this creature supposed to be? So Yeah, it was tough. It was tough not to pick Skin of Evil. Trust me, I really wanted to.
Are we ready to wrap things up here, Scholar Beta?
I think so. You got TrekWork for these people for our last episode?
In the comments below, tell us your favorite, your best and worst season 1 TNG episodes, and let us know. Explain your reasoning similar to what we just did here. And with that in mind, I think we have some thank yous in order.
Yeah, of course. Memory Alpha, Trek Core, you all know my love for you. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce this website, but I totally forgot about it until today. Well, actually, earlier this week when I was looking it up. And I want to thank them. If it wasn't for this website, I would not have learned about that matte painting. That was a reuse from Star Trek, the fourth film. It's X
Asterisk.
Scientia. Okay. I was gonna get close. Nice job. X asterisk Scientia. Amazing site. Linked from TrekCore. Just people pointing out reuse props, sets, costumes, designs. It's just beautiful. Tons of information. I knew that thing was a matte painting, and if it wasn't for that website, I would never been able to figure out or pin down where it actually originally came from. So want to thank you, all the Trek fans out there, those listening to this podcast, those maintaining the websites that we mine for great information for this podcast. Just really impressed by y'all. You know, it takes a village to keep the memory and the lore of this TV show going. And it's great to have you all working on this project with us. I feel like we're doing some small portion of that now. So It's great to be a part of that. So yeah, those are my thanks. And I'm looking forward to mining those resources for season 2 when we come back from a little break.
Definitely. And when we come back from our little break, we're starting our examination of season 2 by reviewing The Child, Where Silence Has Lease, and Elementary Dear Data. And big mahalo nui loa to all our listeners. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your feedback and participation in the TrekWork. That's made this a lot of fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you for posting those and giving us something to chat about at the beginning of our episodes.
Definitely. So with that in mind, folks, e malama pono, y'all stay safe, stay healthy, especially now. And we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper.
Peace and long life, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Captain Kanaka here. On behalf of all the educators at Teachers Talking Trek, I hope you enjoyed our little video here. As always, please let us know what you think in the comments. So with that said, live long and prosper, e malama pono, and see you next time.